the very first, well, I guess, teaser episode of SoulBound Studios podcast. My name is Mandi, and I'll be the host of this podcast. I wanted this episode to just be a raw, real. I didn't script this. I have a little bit of notes, but I just wanted to talk to you guys and inform you what we have going on, what this podcast will be, and just introduce myself. So, the podcast officially launches December 3rd of 2023. Um so this episode is intended to just kind of give everybody a heads up of what's coming. But I anyways, regardless, what I envision for this podcast is creative healing without like the fluffy bullshit. You'll find that I'm going to curse a little bit and I'm going to talk about God and I'm going to talk about the universe and the healing powers, but it's not going to be like sometimes when people talk about creativity and healing powers and whatever, it gets really fluffy and kind of honestly just a little too over exaggerated, in my opinion. I don't know how to explain it other than this is more of a real, unfiltered approach to it. And we'll figure that out as we go, I suppose. I just want you to know, like, you'll never hear me use the word chakra because I don't even know what that means. So unless I have my own personal revelation on that, I'm never going to use that word. So there's different like levels of, I think, soul connectivity and like the like hippie versions of the words. I'm not at that level, so I'm probably not going to use those words. I like to think of me as just small town Idaho girl, just trying to figure out life, and I want to share my journey. So that leads me into my next point. I found art at a very, very dark time in my life. Um, and I want to dive into that in a future episode, but really the base of it is in 2016, I went through a very nasty postpartum depression. And I was admitted on a suicide watch for 5 days. While I was there, I started doodling and I would do any of the creative opportunities that they offered. And with that, I found a love for art and a talent that I didn't know I had. But in the midst of all of that, I was struggling to figure out who the hell I was. I didn't know what my purpose in this world was. I didn't know, like, when people would ask me, "Hey, tell me about yourself. What makes you you?" I'm a mom. I don't know. Like, how do you answer that question? And so when I was admitted, I found a hobby. Just, I kind of found that I was good at drawing. I'd always been a little creative, but I just never really considered myself an artist by any means. So when I got out of the hospital, I was like, what the hell is my purpose in this life? Like, why the fuck am I even here? I really struggled with that for a long time. And I would say so that was in April of 2016. And then that fall, I enrolled at the community college for architecture and design. And I took some freehand drawing classes. I just needed something for me outside of motherhood. And at the time, I was a military spouse. And like, I needed something for me that I was doing for myself. So I took these freehand drawing classes and I took some architecture classes. My associate's degree that I later finished is in architecture and design. But what I started doing that next summer is now the foundation of who I've become. I taught myself how to paint with watercolor and I posted my very first watercolor painting online. It immediately gained traction. Um, I had like 6 paintings within the first 24 hours that I had posted it. People wanted me to paint for them. I'd never touched watercolor in my life. I had no idea that was a thing. But all of that started because I was in the thick of a mental health crisis and needed to figure out something for myself. So that's kind of like where SoulBound Studios, the whole passion of it, that was several years ago. I mean, it's 2023 now. And my baby that I had when I was going through that postpartum depression, she just turned 8. So it's been a minute and I've had some time to get my footings, get my grounding. I've had 4 children, a divorce. We moved with the military 7 times in 9 years. And I really just figured out who I am and what my life needs. And I found a lot of peace throughout everything. And so I just want to have like real life conversations about what like navigating shitty situations looks like. I want to have um bring some laughter into the shit we go through. You know what I mean? Like we can be a hot mess, but it's fine. We're fine. It's fine. It's all fine. Um but that's kind of like what my background is and why it is I want to do this. So as I found art as a form of therapy for myself, I found an identity. I found a talent. I found community. Now that we live here in this small town, there's a huge artist community here and I just love it. There's been so many opportunities for connection. And I would say if I had any goal, any specific goal for this podcast, it would be that. I want to hear your stories. If you have ever said to yourself, I'm just nobody, no one, like my story doesn't matter, I want to hear from you. I want to talk to you and I want to hear why you think that, but also I want to hear about you, about your stories. So I'm hoping that this podcast creates a community. My I'll dive into this in a future episode. I've already got a few episodes planned out, but my I set an intention word every year. I don't know if you've ever heard of that philosophy before, but that's something I do. So this year my word was commit. So I'm committing to this podcast. I'm doing it. But next year I've already decided my word is connection or connect, whatever variation of that word. And I hope that this podcast will do that. I hope that this podcast will bring it to life. So, anyways, that's the whole idea is figuring out who the hell you are, figuring out what your passions are, navigating life's bullshit, having fun in the process, finding friendships, creative arts. That's a good one. Any kind of like music or dancing or yoga or painting or drawing or journaling. That's a form of an art. Like I think writing is an art form. Any of the arts is where I'd like to direct my stuff. But if you find your like purpose and your passion through something that's not art related, like I don't know, it could be physics. Like it's still a thing. Let's talk about it, right? It's all about finding who the hell you are and navigating all of the crap that gets thrown at us as women. Um and just having someone that gets you. Judgment free zone. I'll probably tell you some of my shit and if you judge me for it, I'm going to tell you to kiss my ass because I just don't care. We'll get into that later. But it's a no nonsense, no filter, no judgment. Good vibes. Good vibes only. So there's that. Okay. My next point that I want to make here is Soulbound Studios. This podcast was born, I guess, actually, let's go back a little further. This brand, this is a registered brand, was born 3 years ago. Um, if you've followed me for a minute, in 2020, I started an art membership. And shortly after I started it, like it was still brand new baby when my friend Jess joined us. I didn't know her when she joined us to teach with us. We met online and we, I think, had ran that membership 8 months. I'm throwing a number at the wall. We'd ran that membership for a while before I ever met her in person. So that's one, the power of networking. She's going to be our very first episode on the podcast, and she's going to explain and we'll talk through the growth that we've experienced in the last 3 years. But 3 years ago, we had this vision, and I'm now bringing it to life. So that's really cool because it's been something that's been eating at me, like, "You should start that podcast. You should start that podcast. Hey, by the way, you should start that podcast." It keeps eating at me. It's this nagging feeling that won't go away, this really big passion project of mine, and I'm so excited to bring it to life. So Jess is doing some behind the scenes work for me. She's helping me with like the SoulBound Studios website and the graphic design. That's her realm. We'll talk more about it later, but like this has been going in my head for 3 years now. So that's exciting. Um okay, creative healing and personal growth. I would like to talk about, I think we'll do this in future episodes, but really talk about the whole power of the arts in healing. We'll get into that in future ones. It's just a note that I wrote that I wanted to talk about. Um, how different creative outlets can impact our lives. We're going to dive into that. The other thing we're going to do here is break down stereotypes. One is that hippie woo woo vibes of creative healing, right? We're going to break those down. It doesn't have to be fluffy bullshit. It can be raw and real and relatable content that people will want to engage with. I think that there's an audience for everyone. Anyways, whatever. I also want to break down stereotypes in the sense of mental health stigmas. I have a really hard time with mental health stigmas being used against people. I have a very hard time with um, people being classified by their mental health disorders and how people do not feel welcomed or accepted because of those things. Like when I tell people that I was admitted on a suicide watch, like the looks I get, like I was admitted in a mental health facility and people just think like that's where the crazy people go. We're breaking down all of that crap because there's no shame and no judgment in getting the help that you need. So there's going to be a lot of stigma breakdown and stereotypes, all that stuff. I think the community that would most benefit from this podcast, I personally see it as like moms that get lost in motherhood, but it doesn't have to be just moms. I think it can relate to anyone that is having a hard time navigating life in any form, specifically women, because I'm not a man. I don't know how to relate to men. Like, I feel like this is going to be a sisterhood of sorts. This is for people that are seeking personal growth. We're going to talk about goals. We're going to talk about moving forward in life. We're going to talk about all of the fun that you have in that kind of stuff. And I mean, yeah, we're going to talk about the hard stuff too, but it is a very much so a personal development podcast. Okay, so what to expect? We're going to do weekly episodes starting December 3rd. Mark it on your calendars. We are going to launch a new episode every Sunday morning. So, this is intended to be your Sunday morning coffee chats. This was inspired by my best friend because it's something that her and I do. We do a coffee chat every Sunday morning, and it has been our therapy. So, we're going to do that. I want to invite you guys to just put your headphones in. I do curse. You're going to hear cursing on this podcast. So put your headphones in if you don't want your kids to hear it. But it's raw and it's real. And we're every Sunday morning, if you want to put your headphones in and have a coffee on the couch, I will join you. That's why I record mine on the couch, because that's where we have inspiration. And that's where me and my best friend have connected through all of our stuff that we've been through. So Sunday mornings, new podcast will air every single week. Sorry, I'm looking at my notes. um, okay, that's another thing you can expect is the schedule. I also want to come out with a segment, a feature. I don't know. So my best friend and I have this thing. There was one time that I got drunk. Again, judgment free zone, so don't come at me. I got drunk and I was talking to someone and I was like, ask me anything you want. I'll tell you. My best friend's like, please, God, do not ask her anything you want. Like, do not do that because she will tell you. I want there to be a spot in this podcast that's called Ask Me Anything, where I will try my hardest to not filter out my responses. It can be fun, but I will tell you, there's a couple things on here that I won't talk about. Right now, my family and I are going through a custody battle of sorts. I won't talk about that. I might talk about the difficulties of it. I might talk about how it is tearing me up inside, but I won't give details into my kids' lives, and I won't talk crap about my ex-husband. It won't be that. So when I say ask me anything, I'm going to try to be as transparent as possible. So that's coming soon too. There will be a link on my podcast website for that, and we'll do that. So you guys can ask me anything you want, and I will do my best to have a conversation with you about it. So there's that. Guests. This is the part I'm super excited for. I sometimes will get hit with random inspiration. I feel like I'm very connected to the messaging that I need to put onto this podcast. And all of my content ideas usually stem from conversations with other people. And so as I have those conversations, or if you send me something and ask me anything, I think I might be reaching out if you would like to be on the podcast. You can send, we might have a little spot on the Ask Me Anything that says, would you like to be a guest on the podcast about this topic? And you can answer yes or no. We might do something like that. But like this morning, I was getting ready and I had a topic come to my head. And instantly I was like, I need to have my best friend on this podcast. I don't know if she will. We'll see. But I get inspiration like that randomly. So guests will be sporadic, not consistent. There will be sometimes where it's just me hanging out on my couch. And probably as we get started, it'll be more and more of that. Other times it will be um, with a guest and we'll talk about a specific topic. So if you have a story that you want to share or a topic you think would be good, send them my way and we can have you on the podcast. Okay. My next topic here that I want to share is still in development. When I start this podcast, I'm not doing this for any kind of monetization. Like I don't have a product to offer. I don't have anything to offer. However, with that said, I do have this dream of hosting a beautiful, connected, creative healing type of retreat. That is in the works. We've already established a date. If you're interested in it, I'm putting the feelers out for it right now. August 9th of 2024. It's that weekend. So that's the only information I know. We don't have a venue yet. I don't have any other information other than that. August 9th, 2024. I'll dive deeper into the reason for the meaning for that date in a future episode, but it's happening. So that has been a big, audacious goal of mine for the longest time. The longest time. I've always wanted to host a retreat where women, can come together, figure out who they are, because I feel like there's we get caught up in the day-to-day shuffle between your work, the kids, extracurriculars, being a wife, or in my case, single mom, whatever it is you're doing, like I feel like we always just belong to someone else. Like our worth is established on whether or not we're a good mom or a good wife or a good Girl Scout troop leader. That's a new thing for me. Or whatever it is we're doing, get into this thought process that our worth is determined on how good we are for other people. And I want this retreat weekend to break that down and find your own worth outside of anybody else. Who are you to yourself? What things do you enjoy? So that's what I kind of envision for it. I think the podcast will support it, but getting together for a whole weekend to dive into that where you don't have to cater to anybody but yourself. Like that just sounds so cool to me. So it's been a dream of mine for a long time. I thought it was like this massive, audacious goal that would never happen because for whatever reason, I thought that I had to own the land that we were going to do it on. And I don't have to own the land. There's a thing called renting, whatever. Regardless, that is something that's coming up. Um, yeah. So there's that. Okay. I'm so excited to do this. Like, so excited. Hosting this podcast has been a dream of mine for a long time. Running these retreats have been a dream of mine for a long time. I'm about to cry, but I'm not going to because that's awful. I don't want to be that person. Whatever. Crying's good. Let it out sometimes. But right now is not the time. Regardless, my gratitude for anybody that's listening right now is soaring high. So freaking high. I'm so grateful for you guys being here during the messy foundation parts of this. If you wouldn't mind liking, subscribing, following, whatever, it would really, really, really help support this dream of mine. That's like the number one way you can support podcasters is by liking and subscribing to their show. If there's something you want to hear about on this episode or something you're excited for, tag me on Instagram. That's the only form of contact I have right now, but it's at SoulBound Art Studios. Go follow me on Instagram, send me a DM, comment on one of the very few posts that are up right now, and be ready for the podcast starting on December 3rd, 2023. Thank you again so much for being here. I'm so excited. This is going to be good.